like this, I have a budget chair meeting at 3 that goes to about 3:30, and so I might be a little bit, I might be a little bit late on Thursdays. So to start off with, I'd like to welcome everybody to General Government Budget. Sorry we haven't met before, but we really haven't had a lot of reason to meet yet, and but I did want to get us together today and go over a few things and have some presentations by some of the agencies that we are going to be looking at for their budgets. In about 2 weeks is when we'll start the budget analysis and going over their budgets. So before we get started, though, are there any bill introductions? All right. Well, with that, I'd like to go around and introduce everybody. We have quite a few new people on this committee, and so I'd like for you to tell a little bit about yourself, and then we'll just go around the room. So, Representative Melton, if you'd like to start.
Oh, there. I'm Representative Lynn Melton, and I represent District 36 in Kansas City, which is out by the Speedway.
Hi, I'm Sandy Pickard. I'm a brand new representative from Wichita, District 88. I'm a retired nurse. I know a whole lot about nursing, but not a whole lot about budgets, so I'm here to learn.
My name is Adam Turk. I represent District 117, the new District 117. We are Western Shawnee, Western Lenexa, DeSoto, through Eudora and into rural Douglas County, where I grew up. So I represent a diverse population, and happy to be here. Thanks.
Bill Riley. I'm from Wellington. My district is 80. And that's the south part of Sumner County, south part of Cali County. So we border Oklahoma down there. Retired, background is teaching. Got a small business there in Wellington. So happy to be here.
Go ahead and start over on the other side with Representative Robinson.
Good afternoon. My name is Marvin Robinson, 35th District, Kansas City, all the way up to the underground railroad. Just trying to learn.
Chuck Smith from the real Pittsburgh, and I'm a retired school teacher, taught for 43 years, taught mathematics, and math was a great field to be in because I could find a job anywhere I wanted. I went from Kansas City, Kansas, to Independence, Kansas, to Topeka, back to Pittsburgh, and there was always a job waiting on me. I have 7 children. I'm very frugal, so I'm surprised I'm on a budget committee. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Mike Amix, and I represent the 45th District, which is Western Lawrence, since it's kind of shrunk down a little bit after redistricting. This is my 5th year on general government budget, 3rd year as the ranking.
And I'm Kyle Hoffman. I represent the 116th District. This is my 13th year in the legislature, and I was actually on this committee my first 2 years. And that feedback is kind of driving me crazy. My first 2 years, I was on this committee as a member, and then I've been chair of the agriculture budget in the past for about 4 years, and then the last 5 years starting. Okay. All right. the last 5 years, including this year, I've been the vice chair of appropriations. So I haven't actually been a budget chairman for several years, so this is a little bit new for me, but I'm excited to be back in doing budgets. I represent the 6 counties right along the Oklahoma line. Actually, Bill and I run into each other. I have most of the rest of Sumner County, the part that he doesn't have. So, but I have Pratt County, Barber County, and Comanche County, Harper County, and part of Sumner County and Kiowa County. So quite a few counties down in the south central part of the state. I'd like to welcome you all here. I've told people in the past that if you're able to get onto a budget committee at the very beginning, I think you will understand the whole budget process a lot better as you get into it. It's something that a lot of legislators don't really get to see the budgets in the degree that we're going to be able to, that we'll get to see them in. And it really does help when the whole budget comes out, and then you're able to kind of have a little bit of an idea, because of the work we do in here, what the whole budget looks like. So I hope that you enjoy it, and as we move forward. Before we totally get started, I'd like to also have our staff introduce themselves. So Martin, if you'd like to start.
Certainly. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Martin DeBoer. I'm a fiscal analyst, and I'll be facilitating this committee. This is my 4th session, and coincidentally, my 4th session in this committee as well. Before this committee, I'll be presenting the budgets for the Administrative Hearings Office, the Board of Barbering, Board of Cosmetology, the Attorney General's Office, the Kansas Lottery, the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission, Judicial Council, and the Judicial Branch. And we do have some fellow analysts here as well that will introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sharday Kane. This is my 3rd legislative session, and I am responsible for the Kansas Department of Revenue and the Board of Tax Appeals in this committee, and then the Board of Commerce and the Department of Commerce and the Board of Pharmacy as well. And I look forward to working with you all.
Good afternoon, committee. My name is Stephen Wu, also with Legislative Research. If you have questions on the budgets for the Department of Administration, CAPERS, or Department of Labor, feel free to reach out. I also staff House Insurance and Pensions, so if you ever want to talk pensions, let me know. Good work with you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Luke Drury, and the budgets that I will be presenting to you this year are the Kansas Dental Board and the Optometry Board. I also staff Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee and House Water. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Molly Pratt. I'm a fellow with KLRD, so this is my 1st session. Before this committee, I will be presenting the Kansas Human Rights Commission budget, and I also have a few other agencies that I'm presenting to the Agriculture Budget Committee, as well as the Transportation Committee. I also staff the Veterans and Military Committee, as well as the Senate Education Committee.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Light. This is my 1st year as a fiscal analyst with KLRD. In front of you this year, I'll be presenting the budgets for the Pooled Money Investment Board, the State Treasurer, the Secretary of State, the Insurance Department, and the Governmental Ethics Commission. And I also staff House Appropriations.
Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Prosser. This is my 1st session as a fiscal analyst with KLRD. Before you, I will be presenting the Kansas Real Estate Commission, the Kansas Board of Real Estate Appraisers, and the Board of Hearing Aid Examiners. Thank you.
I would like to also note there's 2 more staff members who were unable to make it today. We have James Fisher. He will be presenting the Office of Information Technology Services. And we have Dr. Megan Leopold, who will be presenting the Office of the Governor.
Thank you guys for being here. I know some of you may have to to leave, and but I appreciate it. Okay. All right. Trevor, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Trevor Jones, and this is my first session for the broadcasting team.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. I am Jesse with the Revisor Statutes Office, which provides all the bill drafting services and legal advice. I also staff House Appropriations.
My name is Susan Tyndall, and I am the committee assistant for this budget committee, and this is my second session.
All right, you guys, and to the members of the committee, I will be getting you a list of who the different fiscal analysts are for the different budgets, and then also a listing of when we will be reporting those out to appropriations. And so you have a little bit of an idea when we'll be hearing them in here. And feel free to call them if you have any questions before we do the budgets. The way it'll work is that we will have the agencies will come in, they'll present their budget. Martin or his team, whoever is in charge of that budget, will give an analysis of it, and that'll usually happen in one day, and then a day or two later, we will then have the actual working of the budget. And so there'll be some time period in there for you to be able to look at it, kind of analyze what the agency said, things like that. I will tell you, it's a fast process. Not a lot of time to wait and make a lot of lengthy decisions beforehand. We have to keep it kind of moving. So if you have issues, if you have questions, make sure you get to them as quick as possible. Feel free to contact me or Vice Chairman Riley or Ranking Minority Amix if you have any questions also. And so we'll be happy to help. Representative Williams, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. I apologize
for
being late, but my name is Laura Williams, and I represent the new House District 30 in Lenexa and Olathe, and I'm excited to be here and on a budget committee and learn. I am a freshman, and I have a lot of learning ahead of me, so thank you so much.
All right, welcome. There's quite a few freshmen in the room, so it'll be fine. I think it's a good committee. I will say we have the most budgets of any of the budget committees. We have 26 budgets, and I think that's right, isn't it? 26. Yeah, I think 26 budgets. So we have the most of anybody. Some of them are fairly small. A lot of fund agencies, which you'll get to understand that a little bit later. What we're going to do today is go over the Coma-Cora overview. Jesse's going to go over that with us a little bit. I know you've probably heard it in other committees, but we need to make sure that we kind of reemphasize that. And when Jesse gets done, then I've asked some of the agencies to come in over the next 2 weeks. We're going to have the different agencies come in. They're not going to necessarily give us budget information. It's more of what they do. So I've kind of picked the agencies, like the Office of the Governor's not going to come in, Secretary of State. We kind of all know what they do, but some of the ones I picked are ones that you might not be as familiar with. And so it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what they do before they come again to us in the next, probably next month to present their budgets. So Jesse, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and start us off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Jesse, Assistant Revisor with the Revisor Statutes Office. So thank you for the time to revisit some of those COMA core requirements that are required of this body. So there's a handout, then the testimony posted online that goes more in the depth into the statutes and the requirements of COMA and CORA. So first, let's go over COMA. So Kansas Open Meetings Act, which we call COMA sometimes, provides that meetings of public bodies should be open to the public, and that includes subcommittees or working groups. And COMA defines a meeting as any gathering of the body's members where there's a majority of that body's members, and it is held for the purpose of discussing the business of that body. So a gathering of a body's members can come in different forms, formal, informal. We're talking group text, telephone, small group right outside the committee room, serial communications, a reply all on an email also count. And then the majority of the membership would be half of this committee's membership, and then +1 would be the majority. And then lastly, for the purpose of discussing the affairs of the body. So for example, a group of you, that is a gathering, and as a majority of this body goes out to lunch, you can talk about what you're excited for after session, but you cannot talk about what is going to happen in that meeting that day or the day before and what you would like to do about it. So you're prohibited from talking about the affairs of the body. These are all very fact specific. So when they come up or there is an issue, come to our office and we will let you know and we will work on that. So when you do have a meeting, there are requirements. The public body must make reasonable efforts to allow the public to attend or listen to the meeting. And the public must be able to ascertain how the committee members voted. So a vote number, however the chairman likes to conduct those votes. If you've heard of them, there are these things called closed meetings or executive sessions to discuss very sensitive information. And there are very special exceptions that allow those in the statute, and we address those issues also as they arise. On to open records. The Kansas Open Records Act is a law that requires records of a public body be open for the public to examine and inspect. Public records you want to think about are any recorded information that is either provided to the body. So as I said, my memo, that is to follow up and supplement this presentation, that is now an open record. If that was not online or publicly available at this moment, and I mentioned that, the mention of that also makes that memo a public record. So individual records are not subject and they are not public records. But if you do in this meeting publicly cite them and identify them, then they can become public records and can be requested through the CORA process. There are a few exceptions on what are open records. This is also a case-by-case basis, and we can address those also as they arise or when there is a request for those records. So these are all important things to remember because there are penalties for violating these two laws. In order to enforce COMA and CORA, the consequences for a violation are a $500 civil fine and training in order to make sure that you become more familiar with the act that the violation has occurred from. So with that, thank you for the time to present on this and to remind you all of some of the requirements of COMA and CORA.
Okay. Representative Riley.
Thanks very much for that. Can you hear me all right? Thanks very much for that overview. So clarify a little bit for us. I've been to some of the AG's stuff in the past on COMA and CORA. So if I'm sitting here, just to clarify, and I take notes of this meeting, is it not true or not true that those can be subpoenaed?
So subpoena wise, I'm not sure, but those would not be subject to an open records request. So those are your individual legislator records, and those are an exception to an open records request.
Any other questions? like I said, I'm sure you've probably heard this in most of your other committees already, but the main thing that I want to make sure, do not by any time do a reply all. You know, if you get an email that's got all of us on it, just don't do a reply all. If you want to email certain persons, fine, but you know, that just is a huge no-no. So, you know, don't do that. And then the other thing that Jesse brought up is, you know, if you go and talk to Martin about a certain budget, that is confidential between him and you. But the minute that you bring it up here and say, well, I got this document that I need, you know, want to, then it is part of the committee history. So just those are kind of the couple of things that I wanted to bring out. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Jesse. Now, yesterday we were going to go over Budget 101 and some other stuff. We will do that. Yesterday was a big emergency came up, but I had to go to the ball game, and and so we weren't able to have the meeting. But we will do that next week, right before we kind of get started on the budgets. Incidentally, the first budget that I have to report out to appropriations is February 7th, I believe. Yeah, so it's going to happen pretty quick here. And so next week is the only other time we really have to go over some of this. So we will go through that. It'll kind of give you an idea of the terminology and those sort of things like that. But today we're going to have some of the different agencies come in. We're going to start off with the Judicial Council, and Nancy Strauss is here with the Judicial Council. You will see the Judicial Council again, most likely, because I will be or they'll be introducing a bill, one or the other, for the Judicial Council in not too long. If you haven't already, have you introduced it yet, or no? Okay, and so that bill hopefully will be. I'm pretty sure we're going to hear it here in committee. So anyway, Nancy, welcome. Might pull it down.
The right button. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to tell you a little bit about the Judicial Council. As the chair said, I'm Nancy Strauss. I've been with the agency for 20 years, first as a staff attorney, and for the last 12 years or so as the executive director. I know a lot of you are new and you may have never even heard of the Judicial Council. I didn't know much about it even as a practicing attorney until I went to work for the agency. So I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about what this little agency does, because they do a lot of different things. The agency is just a few years short of being 100 years old. The legislature.
Nancy, can I stop you just for a second? I'm sorry, I should have said something. All of the testimony we're going to hear today is in the S drive, if you're familiar with that. So you can pull it up on the S drive, and we're not going to print out testimony in this committee. So anyway, sorry about that.
That's good to know, because if you don't have copies in front of you, I'm going to refer to that testimony for a few things. Like I said, the council was created in 1927. The legislature created it as sort of a liaison between the legislature and the courts, because they wanted to have a way of getting information about things that needed to be changed. That's kind of expanded and changed over the years. But the council's current mission is to improve the administration of justice. So to do that, there's a lot of different things that the council does. I want to make clear one thing that's often misunderstood. Although we're in the judicial branch, we are a completely separate agency from the court system. So the Judicial Council has its own budget, its own pay plan, its own personnel rules, and it's not under the administrative authority of the Supreme Court like all the rest of the judicial branch. And we just have 5 full-time employees. The Judicial Council itself is a 10-member body that is composed of 1 Supreme Court justice, 1 Court of Appeals judge, 2 district court judges, 4 practicing attorneys, and the chairs of House and Senate Judiciary. Now that body only meets a couple of times a year usually, but they have created a way to get a lot of work done by creating an advisory committee system where there are at least a dozen generally different advisory committees where judges, attorneys, legislators, lay people are asked to serve on these committees to do studies and report back to the Judicial Council. So the one thing I want to tell you about the advisory committees is a lot of care is taken to form committees that are balanced in terms of point of view and diverse as far as geographic makeup. We try to get people from all over the state to serve on these committees so that there are a lot of points of view looking at different things. And the council does a lot of studies for the legislature. Every year at the end of a session, we get study requests to study a certain bill. And for example, if it were a criminal law issue, our criminal law committee has prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges, maybe a law professor, a lot of different points of view. And they try to work out some of the kinks before something comes back in front of the legislature, and often that helps to make it go through the process fairly easily. Not always, but it does a lot to move things along. The council has also drafted a lot of the codes that the courts use. The criminal code, civil code, family law, probate code. They have drafted all of those codes at some point in time over the years. Now, of course, they're not the exclusive entity that's amending those codes, but our standing committees will recommend amendments that they think need to be made, and occasionally will completely modernize or update a code. And then those are, of course, just recommendations to you coming in the form of a bill that you can take or leave. We're just making recommendations to improve things. Another thing that the council does is to publish legal books. That has been a form of revenue for the agency. We publish 5 different legal books. The council drafts all of the pattern jury instructions for both civil and criminal trials in the state, and those books are updated, the criminal book annually and the civil book every other year. And we have 3 other books as well. And the final big category of things we do is legal forms. You kind of put us into the business of creating forms by drafting statutes that say your motion is sufficient if it's in substantial compliance with the Judicial Council form. So we draft that form and make it available on our website. So we have dozens of forms that are required by statute, but we have added hundreds more. There's categories of forms. Our juvenile forms are primarily for the attorney bar to use because the public doesn't file a lot of those child needed care cases. And obviously they don't file the juvenile offender cases, but we have a huge set of forms for juveniles. But we also created forms for self-represented litigants, and that's an increasing issue, access to justice for people who can't afford attorneys. And it's also an administration of justice issue for the court system because it's hard for the judge to deal with a self-represented litigant who comes in with a form that they got off of Colorado's website. You know, it doesn't even match our law. So it helps everyone if we're providing people with the right forms that they need to use. That's really a fast overview. There in your materials, you'll see an illustrative list of some of the codes that the council has drafted. You'll see more details about the books that we publish and a list of our current advisory committees. You'll be able to tell from this list, the ones that have an asterisk are what we call ad hoc committees that have been created specifically to conduct a study that was requested where we didn't have a standing committee that was just right for that topic. And generally, those committees will do their work, submit their report, and the council will, after a time to see that whether follow-up is needed, dissolve those ad hoc committees. And of course, the next year, we're likely to create a few more. So I'm happy to stand for questions if you have any.
All right, anyone have any questions? You'll hear, if you're on judiciary, for sure, you'll hear them every once in a while. They'll say, well, we're going to refer this to the judicial council. And I was on judicial committee several years ago, and about half of us were not lawyers, half of us were lawyers. And if you get a room full of lawyers together, usually it takes forever for them to make a decision. So it's good sometimes for them to be able to say, well, this is too much for us to be able to work on right now in this 90 days. We're going to send it to judicial council. Then they'll come back with something that is a little bit more pliable for them to look at the next year. So any other questions? All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have the Pool Money Investment Board. Karen Stadelman. Sorry about that, Karen.
Well, as he said, I'm Karen Stallman. I'm the Accounting and Operations Manager at Pooled Money Investment Board. And I'll explain a little bit about what we do. The Pooled Money Investment Board manages the investable state monies available from the State General Fund and the hundreds of other individual state agency funds received by the State Treasurer's Office. The Pooled Money Investment Board also provides investment management services for the Kansas Department of Transportation and the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. For investment and cash flow management purposes, the investable state monies are combined with Kansas municipal investment pool deposits to create the Pooled Money Investment Portfolio. Investments are made in accordance with investment policies provided by statute, by rules and regulations and policies set by the board. The board is comprised of 5 members, the state treasurer, and 4 members appointed by the governor. The governor also appoints the board chairperson. Allowable investments for the Pooled Money Investment Portfolio are U.S. Treasury securities, U.S. governmental agency securities, high-grade commercial paper, high-grade corporate bonds, overnight repurchase agreements, and Kansas Bank CDs. Investments are restricted to a maximum maturity of 4 years. As of December 30th, 2022, the portfolio had assets of $7.6 billion. The Pooled Money Investment Board administers the Municipal Investment Pool, a state program providing municipalities with an investment alternative for their idle funds. Municipal Investment Pool offers an overnight investment option as well as fixed terms out to 730 days. Municipalities must first offer funds to their local financial institutions. If the financial institutions will not match the statutory investment rates, the pool becomes one of the investment options per KSA 12-1677B. As of December 30th, 2022, the municipal investment pool balance was just over $1.4 billion. The Pooled Money Investment Board supports the linked deposit lending programs. The linked deposit programs are administered by the State Treasurer's Office. These programs provide qualified banks with low-cost funding to support agricultural production, home construction and renovation, and not-for-profit adult care facility construction and renovation. Additional loan programs added during the 2021 legislative session were the City Utility Low Interest Loan Program, Extraordinary Utility Cost Loan Program, and Economic Recovery Loan Program. Total loans were $62 million as of December 30th. For KSA 79-2005, a county or the governing body of any taxing subdivision within a county may receive loans from the Pooled Money Investment Board in the event a taxpayer appeals to the Court of Tax Appeals or pays taxes under protest. The assessed valuation of such property must exceed 5% of the total county assessed valuation of all property located within such county, and the taxpayer must receive a refund of such taxes paid under protest or a refund made pursuant to the provisions of KSA 79-1609 and amendments thereto. Loans to local taxing districts totaled $6 million as of December 30th. The board approved depositories of state fee agency, custodial, and other miscellaneous agency accounts. Large fee agency accounts are awarded on a competitive bid basis. A financial services negotiating committee is formed to review all bids and present a recommendation to the board for review and approval. All other accounts are generally awarded to the bank of the agency's choice. Agency must remit the fee account balances to the state treasurer's office daily unless authorized by the board to remit less frequently. KSA 12-1677B allows Kansas cities, counties, and school districts to apply for expanded investment authority if they have a written investment policy which has first been approved by their governing board. Entities with expanded investment authority must first offer funds to their local institutions. If the financial institutions will not match the statutory investment rates, entities with expanded investment authority may invest in one of the investment options per 12-1677B with a maximum maturity of 4 years. The Pooled Money Investment Board is responsible for reviewing and approving applications for expanded investment authority and conducting an annual review of those entities. The Pooled Money Investment Board is funded through administrative fees. Statute allows for an administrative fee to be netted from investment earnings on the pooled money investment portfolio. An administrative fee up to 10 basis points is assessed on the amortized cost of state monies and up to 25 basis points on monies deposited in the municipal investment pool. The current fee on municipal investment pool deposits is 15 basis points. Healthcare Stabilization Fund and Kansas Department of Transportation also pay administrative fees. Fees in excess of the amount approved by the legislature for operations are transferred to the state general fund monthly. For fiscal year 23, as of December 30th, $4.13 million in administrative fees were transferred from the Pooled Money Investment Board fee fund to the state general fund. Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you, Karen. So you would, I guess we would say that you're the state's bank. Is that kind of how you would?
Well, the treasurer's office is the state's bank, but we take the idle funds.
Okay.
And we are in charge of investing those.
So yeah, you're an investor then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, anytime we have, you'll hear this every once in a while through we're going to the Pool Money Investment Board. We've actually borrowed from them ourselves through the legislature and then paid it back. We don't do that very often, but we have done that before. So, any questions? Yeah, Representative Robinson.
This is a lot more interesting than what I had thought. The first presenter to the lady that's preceded you, and then you. How often do y'all, is it possible to try to answer this? Do you have a platform to decode the complexities of what you do to the to try to take in, because I'm like, because I was kind of like dozing off a little early because I ate too much for lunch, but I'm like, these people are talking about, so I might be out of order, maybe an ignorant question, but I just wanted to throw that out there because it seemed like it would be really helpful to decode this. There's so many areas. Volunteer with the Alliance for Economic Inclusion with FDIC and the Federal Reserve Bank doing community outreach stuff. They have a whole complicated, the EPA have, your language is your language in terms of industry, but regular, so I'll shut up there if that makes any sense. And I hope I'm not out of order. I didn't know.
No, you're fine. Never worry about asking a question. So, yeah. Martin, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Representative, a lot of the agencies have websites that really break it down for a general population, as well as KLRD's website, ks.gov. We provide a lot of information there. And in our budget analysis that we present, the first page will kind of give a big general overview of what the agency does. So there are many resources out there for these agencies, and I would have to say a lot of them do a very good job on their websites for people to get an idea.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wanted some of these agencies to come in, because we'll throw these acronyms out, we'll throw these names out. Well, we're gonna let's talk to the Pool Money Investment Board about this. And I wanted you guys to have a little bit of an idea what these agencies do before we go into the budgetary process. So, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just had 3 questions. One of those is, I know that you invest money that comes in and out of the SGF funds. So what about the all funds money? What, money that goes to KDOT and different places like that, that also goes through the treasurer's office. So how does that get invested? Or
So in the portfolio is the state general fund money. And then agencies, say it's KDOT or it's here. If they have they have their idle funds and they're all in the state bank account. Those are the monies that are combined with the municipal investment. That's basically, it's all the state's idle funds, whether it's state general fund or agency fund.
thank you for clarifying that, because it sounded from your testimony here that you were just doing state general funds investment. So it's anything's laying around under the carpet, whatever you're at it.
We work very closely with the state treasurer's office to determine what every day, every morning, determine what the investable cash flow is.
And then my second question has to do with just explaining what you explained to the committee. I think most people are used to banks and they understand that on a CD that they're going to get a certain percentage on the return for a CD or investment firm. Do you want to explain more in a lay term what the basis points are? I mean, you said currently 15 basis points, but explain that to people.
15 basis point is 0.15%. 1 basis point is 0.1%.
Everybody get that? How that falls out. Okay. So then part of your testimony, you talked about having a statutory investment points rate, statutory investment rate. So you explain to the committee a little bit about who sets those rates and how often they get set. Okay. And that's my last question. Thank you.
Actually, our office sets those rates. For statute, we're supposed to use the Wall Street Journal. So we use the Wall Street Journal to poll treasury rates. We set those every Monday and they're posted on our website, and we call those minimum rates that banks must offer. So if you are a bank and you don't offer that minimum rate, then the municipalities can go elsewhere.
Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Karen, thank you for wonderful presentation. The chairman brought up the fact that we have borrowed money from the PMIB in the past. And I know the last couple of years, we've had quite a bit of discussion about when is it time to pay that off? What is our current balance that
I
the,
believe that's paid off.
that's all done now? Okay, thank you very much.
Karen, you guys also do the investment for the for our fund or our I knew I wouldn't remember the treasurer has funds or things that are unclaimed property. I knew it. The unclaimed property. Do you also do any of the investment for that? You don't? Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, we look forward to seeing you again. I understand you're the accountant. That you don't have an executive director right now. So
No, we have a staff of 5, and currently we are without a director.
okay. So are you the acting director or?
We don't actually have an acting director.
Okay.
Our board's searching.
All
You
right.
have to have a lot of financial background. You have to have, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah.
So you drew the short stick.
Yes, I did.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Next off, we have Board of Tax Appeals, Kristen Wheeler. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you, Chair Hoffman, members of the committee. My name is Kristen Wheeler. I am Chair of the Board of Tax Appeals. I have been with the agency since 2021. With me, I've got Jody Allen. She's our Executive Director. She has been with the agency for how many years? 15 years. Happy to be with you this afternoon and get to meet some new faces and tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. I want to tell you first where we are. We're just a hop across the street over at the Eisenhower office building. Our hearings are open to the public, so our doors are open. We're happy to have visitors. We don't get very many, but Senator Tyson has come over to see a hearing before, so if that's something that any of you are ever interested in doing, please let us know. We'd be happy to get you our calendar and try to accommodate something there. As far as who we are, we have 16 full-time positions in our office. Those positions encompass 3 board members, a chief hearing officer, our executive director. We have an IT systems manager, a general counsel, 2 staff attorneys, and 7 administrative staff. So at one point in the time, the board had 50 full-time employees. Including 5 board members, we've dwindled down since that time, but our work has not dwindled in that time. All of our board members and our chief hearing officer are appointed by the governor. We serve staggered 4-year terms. For the board members, the general requirements are 1 must be an attorney, 1 must be an accountant, and 1 must be an appraiser. In any event, all must have some legal, tax, accounting, or real property experience. You can have no more than 2 members of the same political party and no more than 1 member from any congressional district. And there is an exception to that rule in the event the governor can't find any qualified candidates from separate congressional districts. But I am your Southerner from Wichita. Any non-appraiser member must take coursework in real property appraisal within 2 years of appointment. And 1 of the board members is selected by the governor to serve as chair. That's me. Our chief hearing officer presides over our small claims division, which I'll talk about in a minute, and also sits as a board member pro tem when a board member is not available for regular division hearings. And 2 board members constitute a quorum for us to do business, although in practice, nearly all of our cases are heard by all 3 board members. Current board members are, our accountant member is Ginger Powell. She was appointed in 2021, just before me. She's a former managing director of Berberich Trahan & Company, where she was a CPA for 35 years. Our appraiser member is Devin Sprecher. He served a previous term with the board from October 2015 to April 2020 and was reappointed with us in February of 22. He has over 25 years experience as a certified general real property appraiser and has appraised multiple types of commercial, industrial, and agricultural properties. Our chief hearing officer is Tom Brown Jr. He was initially appointed in June 2020 and reappointed in January of 2021. He began his career with the Kansas Department of Revenue in 1982 as an auditor. He worked then in the privilege tax section, the tax policy group, and eventually as a hearing officer in the Department of Revenue's Office of Administrative Appeals. And then finally, you've got myself. I was appointed in April of 2021. I was in private practice for 12 years in Wichita, worked in the areas of commercial and residential real estate, financial services litigation, municipal practice, civil litigation, did a little bit of everything. Then served 2.5 years as a clerk to retired, now retired, senior U.S. District Court Judge J. Thomas Martin. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our truly extraordinary and talented and dedicated staff with the agency. Like Jody, many have worked with the agency for more than 15 years, some more than 30. So many of my staff members have forgotten more about the Board of Tax Appeals than I would ever know. But each one of them wears multiple hats because we are a small agency. We have a tremendous workload. And I just want to acknowledge their dedication and talent and say that it has been a great pleasure to work with all of them the last couple of years. Our enabling statute is 742433 at SEC. We are a specialized administrative tribunal within the executive branch. We are the highest administrative tribunal that hears appeals related to ad valorem taxes, which are property taxes, income taxes, sales, compensating use, and inheritance taxes. Our mission is to resolve disputes between taxpayers and taxing authorities promptly and impartially, and to help maintain public confidence in the state and local tax system. We have two divisions. We refer to them colloquially as a regular division and small claims division. Our regular division has jurisdiction over tax equalization appeals, protests, exemption applications, appeals from determinations from the Secretary of Revenue, and that includes the Department of Taxation and Department of Property Valuation. We look at economic development and industrial revenue bond exemptions, tax grievances, applications for no-fund warrants and tax levy increases, revenue neutral rate process challenges, which is a new challenge that was created in the last legislative session. And we take district-wide reappraisal requests. Our small claims division has mandatory jurisdiction over all appeals involving valuation of single-family residential property. So that means anytime somebody appeals the value of their home, they have to go through the small claims division first before appealing to the regular division, if that's something that they want to do. Small claims has optional jurisdiction, meaning the taxpayer can elect an appeal on appeals from the Division of Taxation where the amount of tax does not exceed $15,000, or in commercial property appeals where the property is appraised at less than $3 million. That's with the exception of agricultural use properties, which all have to go through the regular division. So differences between our regular and small claims division. The biggest difference is the record. Regular division hearings are held just like any hearing in a regular district court. We keep an official court record of those. Small claims hearings are informal. We keep no record. The formality is a little bit different. In regular division, just like a court, we apply the Kansas Rules of Evidence, Kansas Rules of Civil Procedure. In our small claims hearing, it's informal. So while they do apply those rules, they're very relaxed in how those presentations are made. Location is different. All of our regular division matters are held in Topeka in our hearing room, or now by Zoom, which I'll talk about in a minute. Small claims hearings are held in the county where the property is located, or an adjacent county, or by telephone. And deadlines are a little bit different. Small claims matters must be set for hearing within 60 days of the date the application is filed, and a decision must be rendered then within 30 days of the hearing. So it's a very quick turnaround on small claims hearings. And regular division matters usually take quite a bit longer to get to hearing. Once they're heard, we have to issue a summary decision within 14 days. And there are some processes then for further opinions to be given if a party is not satisfied with the summary decision. How many cases do we hear each year? In your written materials, when you get a chance to look at those, I've given you a table that breaks down by case type how many cases are filed each year. In the last fiscal year that we have complete numbers for, we had an aggregate of about 6,400 cases filed. That's actually the lowest number that we've had in several years. A little over 2,000 of those were small claims cases. A little over 4,300 were regular division cases. The majority of those are equalization appeals and protests. Those are the same type of case. They both address the valuation of property. The timing of when those is filed is different. So an equalization appeal has to be filed by a certain time frame before the taxes are paid. To file a protest, you must pay the taxes in question first. Appeals, yeah, like I said, that's the majority of our appeals. The other large number of appeals we get are tax exemption applications. So we do quite a few of those every year. We have very few appeals from the Division of Taxation, but those are more complex cases that often take many, many months or sometimes years to resolve. Obviously, not all of those cases make it to an actual hearing with us. All the small claims matters make it to a hearing unless they're voluntarily dismissed. But of regular division matters, of those 4,300 that are filed each year, in fiscal year 21, 490 of those cases went to a formal hearing, and fiscal year 22, 415 went to a hearing. Where do those cases come from? Again, I've given you some tables in your written materials that give you a breakdown of kind of our top geographic areas for cases. As you would expect, it's generally the counties with the most real property parcels that generate the largest number of appeals. That's not always the case, but generally trends true. So our top filers by geographic area are Johnson County, Sedgwick County, Wyandotte County, Shawnee, Douglas, Butler, Neosho, Saline, and Leavenworth counties. Morris County also usually will show up in our top 10, but that is a little bit of an anomaly because of the Council Grove Lake area and parcels on that lake. By land use type, the number one category of appeals that we have are single-family residences, followed by apartments and duplexes. Commercial uses, it's the way that we code those in our system, it's a little bit harder to track how many commercial appeals we get, because instead of a single-family residence, which is a large category, commercial can be broken down into many smaller categories. But our top commercial filings are office buildings, warehouse and office spaces, strip stores, department or what some would call big box stores, and golf courses. And then other types of uses that we see frequent appeals on are agricultural uses, so farming or ranch land either with or without improvements, and oil and gas leases. So our case process, once we get an initial application, the process for how those come in varies by the type of appeal that it is. But once we get that application in our office and filing fees have been paid, it's given a docket number. If it's a small claims case, it's set for a hearing then within 60 days. Evidence exchange then on those is informal. If it's in regular division, it's either set for a hearing sometime down the road or for a status conference, depending on the type of case. Usually we set those regular division cases sometime out to give the parties a chance to do written discovery. So just like in a district court with us, they have a chance to do interrogatories, requests for production. They can do depositions if they want to. They have to exchange expert witness lists and expert witness reports. And so all of that, that process, if it happens, takes some time. Sometimes parties will file pretrial motions with us. Those motions may in and of themselves require hearing. Sometimes the parties get into discovery disputes that the board then has to get involved in remediating before we can move on with the case. Exemption applications are decided on the record, on the paper record submitted by the parties, unless the board does not have sufficient information, and then we will request the parties have a hearing. Each case is determined on a case-by-case basis. They're decided solely on the basis of the evidence and the legal arguments presented by the parties to us in that case. We have no investigative or equitable authority. We must dismiss any case that we do not have statutory jurisdiction over. So our authority is solely limited to that is given to us by the legislature and our enabling statutes. We are prohibited from deciding cases on the basis of the financial tax implications of our decisions. So that means that we cannot consider things like the impact of lost revenue on a taxing district from one of our opinions, or the impact on a residential homeowner of increased taxes. We are bound by legal precedents that are set by the Kansas Court of Appeals and the Kansas Supreme Court. And decisions of our board can be appealed either to a district court or to the Kansas Court of Appeals at the party's option. Our funding, our approved budget at the moment is $2.1 million from the legislature. We've got 3 sources of funding within that broader amount. We have state general fund monies, we have funding from our own filing fee fund, and then we have a duplicating fee fund, which really provides us with a negligible amount of funding. The filing fee fund, when it was established, was approximately 10% of our board's budget. It has grown to be about 50% of our current budget. However, the percentage of our budget provided by state general fund has been increasing over the years because our filing fee fund is currently being depleted faster than we can replenish it. And I will not go into further detail about that because you all will be hearing much more about that in the next few weeks. We have submitted a couple of change packages, so just something for you to keep an eye out for in that budget process for FY23 and 24 of about $72,000. That money would enable us to replace some end-of-life computer equipment on a rotating basis, and would also allow us to migrate our server system over to OITS, which again, I will not bore you with that detail now because you will get much more of it later. And just as a point of interest, we have submitted a funding request to the Spark Committee for a little over $500,000 to replace our document and case management system. It would give us e-filing capability, would enable us to upgrade our website so that we could, as Representative Robinson was asking about, do better public outreach. And replace our end-of-life court reporting system and upgrade our second hearing room. I will note that there have been no significant investments in our IT infrastructure since 2008. At that time, the funding that we did get to do that was provided by grant. And in fact, this segues into my final note that I wanted to give you all and tell you what we've been doing in the last 2 years. In the spring of 22, we installed the necessary AV equipment in our main hearing room to do Zoom hearings, which is something that we'd been getting requests on for some time during the pandemic. So we finally were able to implement Zoom hearings. Originally, we offered that only in cases of illness or inability to travel to Topeka. We've since had such demand for that we've started offering that as just a matter of routine practice. And we have formal procedures now for taxpayers or taxing entities to request a Zoom hearing. We do find that it works best in less complicated types of hearings, and that so far seems to be the only instances in which taxpayers or taxing entities are really requesting that. Would probably turn it down if I had a hearing scheduled for a full week and they asked to do the entire thing on Zoom. So luckily haven't had to deal with that yet. We did hire an IT system support manager in the fall of 2022. Previously, we'd had no IT support in-house since 2019. And at that time, the IT support we did have wasn't formally trained in complex systems management or anything of that nature. So that individual has been very instrumental in helping us address some of the weaknesses in our IT infrastructure and identify some potential failure points, which has really generated a lot of the budget requests that we'll be bringing to all of you. And finally, we have made some minor additions to our website. Again, in the budget process, I'll talk to you more about the difficulties we've experienced with that and what we want to be able to do. But we have been able to push an updated hearing calendar on that. We've been able to put some new forms on that. But there are still a lot of things that we could be doing with the website that we'd like to be able to do. And we really need some better funding to be able to hire some outside help to do that. But at this point, I'd be happy to stand for questions. And if you don't have any now, we're always, like I said, our door is always open. You're always free to contact myself or Jody.
Thank you, Kristen.
Yep.
So on the IT part, and you don't have to answer this at this point, maybe when you come to us for the budget part, you might, how much of that do you touch other agencies? Are your computers totally just isolated, or do you pull information from other agencies, to get the valuations and things like that?
We are totally isolated.
Okay, you're totally isolated.
Yes,
Okay.
we are.
That does make it a little easier.
And in fact, if you wanted to get into real technical specifics with our IT manager, we have our own domain at the time, our own in-house servers, and that's really something that we are trying to get away from, because when those servers become end of life, as they are now, it creates tremendous security concerns for us and operational concerns if those servers were to go down. So we're trying to move away from an environment where we host our own domain in-house.
Trying to get onto our state cloud.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Any other questions? I appreciate very, very good. It evidently takes more than sleeping in a Holiday Inn to be a judge. That's an old joke. A lot of people don't get that.
I'm sure
that's an old commercial. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next off, we have Lauren Snell with the Office of Administrative Hearings.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of this committee. And I, of course, will look forward to getting to visit with you a little bit more in depthly later this year. I'm Lauren Snell. I'm with the Office of Administrative Hearings. As you note, I am the acting director at this particular point, have been since Cheryl Whalen, who was our previous director, retired on April 30th. And so I'm still just kind of waiting. I've waited out the election process and then the inauguration process. And now I'm just waiting to hear what's going to happen with our office as I'm continuing to pull double duty, now going into what is the 8th month for our office. And so while I am looking forward to this, I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to focus on just doing this type of work for the office, or being able to go back and focus on being a judge full-time, one or the other, rather than doing both. But in the meantime, wanted to just give you a little bit of information about our office, and you're going to find that there's a lot of overlap as far as the general background of our office and what you've just heard from the Board of Tax Appeals, because we both do very similar things. We do administrative hearings. The difference with our office is that we were statutorily created. We were originally created in 1998. We were part of the Department of Administration. In 2004, they decided that we should be set apart as an independent agency, with the idea being that we would be completely and totally independent of all state agencies, so that we could provide that third-party analysis without any influence based upon our association with any other agency in the state. Because our responsibility is to provide hearings regarding state agency actions or other entities that we might contract with against individuals of this state or entities of this state. These can be as simple as a denial of food assistance benefits or Medicaid benefits to an individual that they want to appeal because they don't agree with that decision, all the way up to dealing with professional licensures for doctors, nurses, pharmacists, teachers, you name it. We handle a number of those. And in fact, in looking at it here currently, we have 38 contracts that we have entered into with various state agencies and other entities such as Kansas State University, Washburn University, and Emporia State University. In addition to that, in 2015, the legislature also decided that we would be they felt that we would be a much more efficient way of handling grievances by the residents of the sexual predator treatment program housed at the Lawrence State Hospital. And so we were assigned the task to handle those grievance procedures as well, in part to reduce the cost, but also to reduce the burden that was being placed on the district courts in having to handle all of those cases in-house. I would like to think that we have done a pretty good job of both in relieving the courts of that responsibility, but also in reducing the costs that are associated with those types of cases because of the way that we can handle those cases. Most of our hearings we do by telephone. It's far more efficient for us rather than traveling around the state because we would have to potentially go to all 105 counties. We can't require, in some instances, we can't require the individuals to come to Topeka. And quite frankly, in some instances, they would not have the ability to do so, whether it be financial or otherwise. And so for us, it makes a lot more sense to be able to do things either by phone or by Zoom, by video conferencing. So quite frankly, when it came time for adjustments due to the pandemic, we were very easily able to adjust into what needed to be done so that we could continue to provide services. We had very minimal interruption of our services during that time, and we were able to continue to provide the services that we were statutorily required to provide to individuals throughout the state during that time. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't say that, of course, during that time, our caseloads did in fact drop. Pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, however you want to relate to it. We were on average receiving about 3,200 cases a year that were being filed with our office. Last year, we had about 1,800 cases, just over 1,800 cases that were filed with our office. Now, that's in part because of we're still handling some of the pandemic issues, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But it's also in part because we've been working with agencies to the extent that they now understand what we do, they understand how we do it, they understand what our decision-making process is. And as a result, they've been able to go in and work with and develop systems so that they can actually handle some of these cases at what they would call a pre-appeal conference to try to get them resolved before they would actually even come to us. In other words, an individual comes in and says, I want to appeal this decision. I simply don't agree with it. The agency acknowledges it, reaches out to them. They'll sit down and visit, and they'll see if they can get that handled. And so we have a lot of cases that don't make it to our office anymore simply because of the fact that we've been able to develop these systems with the state agencies so that they can handle some of that on their own before it gets to us. As a result, most of what we get are the more complex cases now. We have cases that, as was just mentioned, Kristen had mentioned the fact that she would hate the idea of having to do a week-long Zoom hearing. We have had to do week-long Zoom hearings. I mean, it's the nature of what we do sometimes, and that's what we get to handle, and we accept it, and we willingly take that on. Right now, we have positions for 7 ALJs, which would include, or administrative law judges, sorry, which would include the executive director who also serves as an administrative law judge. Right now, we only have 6 because my position still remains open while I'm serving as the acting director. We have 1 presiding officer who is not technically an administrative law judge, but is an attorney and can handle some of our lower level cases for us to kind of help take those off of the plates, if you will, of the administrative law judges so that they can focus on the more involved cases. We have 5 legal assistants, 1 administrative assistant, and then we always make a point of trying to hire law students so that they can come in and learn from us, learn the administrative law process, but also provide assistance to us along the way. I mentioned the fact that we had about 1,800 cases this past year and alluded to the fact that that's probably going to change. And we actually just kind of got word of that from Washington, D.C. here at the end of December. With the passing of the omnibus bill in December, one of the provisions that was included in that was that all Medicaid eligibility redeterminations were to resume. If anybody's been familiar with the public health emergency, that came about as a result of the pandemic, Medicaid has not looked at any eligibility redeterminations since the pandemic started. Meaning if you were receiving Medicaid benefits, you continued to receive Medicaid benefits regardless of whether you were still eligible. So children who were under the Children's Health Insurance Program who have now aged out continued to receive benefits because there was no way for the state, based upon the federal directives, to go back in and look at those. As a result, we've been in discussions with KDHE, the Division for Healthcare Finance, and we are, in the state of Kansas, probably going to be looking at about 180,000 re-eligibility determinations that are going to start in April. On the average, we receive about 1% to 2% of those eligibility determinations as appeal on a yearly basis. And so based upon that, we anticipate we could receive anywhere from 1,700 to upwards of 3,500 cases over a 12-month period, beginning sometime in April and continuing to probably at least May or June of 2024. And it looks like while we were waiting for the public health emergency to end, as I said, the federal government decided they were not going to wait for that, and they decided to make this something that was going to be a part of the budget. So fortunately, we were anticipating this. I've been working on this for the last 7 months, anticipating that was going to happen. And so we're in a process to hopefully handle this, hopefully maintain all of the statutory and regulatory requirements that we have to. But we are anticipating that we're going to see at least a doubling, if not possibly a tripling of our caseload over the next fiscal year and beyond, based upon trying to play catch up with that. So we're anticipating it. Like I said, we've been in the process of planning for it and working with the agency so that we could be prepared to do that. We've both taken steps so that we can be ready, and it's all hands on deck at our office as soon as that happens. Fortunately, it's after April 1, so hopefully we'll be through the budgetary process and I can focus on that and not have to be distracted from it in any way, shape, or form, but we are anticipating that. As far as our budget, one of the things that I did when I came in as director, because of the timeliness of it, I was the one who got to prepare the budget for that you will be hearing. I wanted to go through and do a complete analysis of that budget. What we had been requesting in the past compared to what we were actually spending. You will note from our request that we actually decreased our budget request this year from what it was in the past. In the past, it was just over 1.7 million. This year, it's just under 1.7 million. I believe it's 1.69 something. I may come to you with a possible change to that. One of the things that we had hoped to do is get an enhancement in place that would allow for us to increase the administrative law judge salaries for our office. The administrative law judges in our office make considerably less than their counterparts for other agencies. It's been that way for a while. For the last 2 or 3 years, we've been working, trying to close that gap. Recognizing that not trying to take away from what other administrative law judges do, but recognizing the expertise and the need for knowledge and the need for experienced attorneys to come in and do this job to be able to cover the areas of law that they might have to for 38 different agencies, as well as the other programs that we handle on a regular basis. And so I may be reaching out. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to handle that at this point. I know that as part of the governor's budget, a lot of that was removed. A lot of those types of enhancements were removed. And so I may be reaching out to members of this committee to discuss that as part of our budget. But again, that's something that I'm still trying to evaluate. And I'll probably be in touch with Martin a little bit about that before we come back before you so that we can talk about it. This is the first that he's heard of it as well. I've talked to the Division of Budget about it, but I hadn't had a chance to talk to him about it yet up to this point. So sorry to spring that on you right now. But it is something that we want to do. And while we appreciate the efforts that have been made within this building to improve the salaries of state employees across the board, we also recognize that 5% of a salary that's much higher than the salary that's being paid to the individuals who work for the Office of Administrative Hearings is larger than 5% of what the employees working for the Office of Administrative Hearings are receiving. So in other words, that gap isn't staying the same, it's actually increasing with each across the board increase. And so we really want to work to try to get through that. We had taken some steps in the last couple of years. And again, if I get to meet with individuals, I'll discuss that a little bit more. There's a couple of other things we're hoping to achieve at some point in the coming years. We're finally at a point where we're bursting at the seams. We're probably going to have to look at moving, but I didn't want to commit to anything like that while I was the acting director. And so once we get something figured out and we get a little more stability, that may be something that we're looking at, because we really have reached our capacity. We are currently in the first floor of the Wildlife and Parks building. I do remember exactly where I was. Somewhere back to the south of here. And so I will be looking at that or discussing it with the new director, whichever happens during the upcoming year. The other thing I would just say is we have been working on transparency within our office as well. We have been trying to make improvements to our webpage. We're always open to suggestions. If there's things that we can do differently, we are actually in the process of trying to figure out how to do some frequently asked questions and different forms and that type of thing that we might be able to add to our webpage just to increase transparency. We have included a docket calendar so that if anybody ever wants to follow one of the cases that come through our office, they are certainly able to do so. We're open to the public. We're required to be open to the public, and we want to be as transparent about what we do as we possibly can to the public, because they're the ones that will potentially be utilizing our services sometime down the road to contest whatever action may be taken against them. It's been, personally, I've been there since 2018, didn't know anything about administrative law until 2016. It's been rewarding. And I was even hesitant to take on the acting director position because I enjoyed my job and really just enjoyed being a judge. And yeah, I didn't have to sleep at a Holiday Inn Express in order to be able to do it. And at no point during the past 2 years have I ever been a cat. So with all that being said, I think we've had a pretty successful run, and we're looking forward to what the future brings.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Yes, please come talk to me about the salary, because you were included in the 5% across the board, right? But yeah, let's talk about that. So please make an appointment to do that. Any other questions? Yeah, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Forgive me, I don't hear well. Did you say 180,000 will be on Medicaid?
Well, okay, so
brought back on Medicaid.
So there are 180,000, and that's a rough figure. It might be like 179,000, so I may have rounded up a little bit, and it could go up by April. But there have been, they will have to go in and review the eligibility for at around 180,000 Medicaid recipients beginning in April, depending upon when their annual review would have come up, to determine if their situation has changed such that they're no longer eligible for Medicaid.
With that tax bill they passed in Congress, will they give us any funds to help with that?
I can't speak to what they're going to do for the Division of Healthcare Finance of KDHE or the Medicaid program. I can tell you that I'm not getting anything from the federal government to offset the additional expense that we're going to incur. And in fact, one of the things that we did last year, you'll see that we added a position to our staff last year. We added an administrative law judge position to our staffing. And part of that was done to, one, help with the caseloads that we were having because we had had a backlog of cases, but then also because we were anticipating the fact that this was going to be happening, and we wanted to have somebody in place so that they would be up to speed and ready to go by the time that that happened. Of course, I didn't realize at the time that Ms. Whalen was going to be leaving us. So now we're still in a position where we got to get that person eventually hired and get them up to speed, but they'll just come in and hit the ground running.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Representative, it'll actually be a net savings for us because right now we are paying for it'll probably end up being about 130,000 of those are not eligible. So in the end, it'll be a savings to the state because we're paying Medicaid costs for those that are not eligible. I'm glad to hear you did hire someone anticipating.
Correct.
that. So okay.
We were fully anticipating it because there'd been talk that beginning as early as July of this last year that they were going to be possibly ending the public health emergency, not anticipating the onset of the flu and RSV and everything else that has overwhelmed the hospitals. And that's the reason why, as I understand it, that's the reason why they want to keep it going, not necessarily for the Medicaid portion of it. So that's why I think the federal government stepped in the way they did.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm glad they did actually, so we can get that right. Any other questions for Lauren? All right, Lauren, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Look forward to talk to you again.
All right, thank you.
Committee, Mark, can you come back tomorrow? Okay, if you, okay, if that's okay with you, let's do that because I'm sorry we went a little longer than I thought we would, but if we can do that, and that way we can get out here. My intention, committee, is to get us out of here by 5 every day. Now, as we get into the budgets, there may be a time, a few times that we might have to go after 5, just because we're going to be on a deadline. But for this, I really hate to keep us after 5. So, Mark, I appreciate you being able to come back. So we'll move his presentation to tomorrow, and so there's a little more housekeeping. Our next meeting will be tomorrow. We'll try to get us out before 5 tomorrow because I know that we're performing on Friday. So many of you want to get home, me including. I'd like to be able to head home too as quickly as possible. I don't intend to have meetings on Friday until we get into the budget process. Once we get into the budget process, plan on being here on Friday evenings, even if we're performing on the floor. So it's one of the non-benefits of honors. Yeah, I guess honors of being on a budget committee is once we get into these budgets, we've got to keep them going. So I hope that this has been helpful. Please reach out to any of these agencies if you have more questions, and we'll certainly be getting more information about them and